I was having such a happy dream. Satoshi was in the dream. He was leading his normal everyday life. He was back on the baseball team. Edie and I acted normally around him because we knew that's how mature people should act. We welcomed him back, as if he had been here with us the whole time. Although he hits well in practice sessions, he still doesn't do well in a real game. Come on, Satoshi. 3 strikes already? I'm cheering for you. Then Satoshi pouted as he mumbled. I felt tears pouring down my face.
Satoshi-kun. Satoshi-kun.
The happy dream faded out with my sobs. The harder I tried to focus on it, the faster it faded. Soon, it was all gone. I could see the bright morning sun through a crack in the curtains. I was in Mion's room at the Sonozuki house. When did I come back? I was crouching in the corner of the room and crying. A dream is a dream. I wish I hadn't woken up. But one must wake from a dream. We live in a world where there are no dreams, and that's why we always wake up. But I wasn't sure if I was the only one dreaming that dream. Because it felt like Satoshi was right beside me.
Satoshi-kun? 帰ってきてくれたんだ。
There was no reply. That was the rule. If it was Satoshi, I wish she'd smile at me just once. But Satoshi's presence faded away, as if he were never there to begin with. I heard the phone ring by the front door. Ah, that's right. I was the only one in the house now. I had to answer it. I got up to walk to the front door. I felt unsteady, so I put my hand on the wall to support myself. I hardly got any sleep. It was like I had a bad cold. The phone continued to ring. I probably didn't have to answer it, actually. But I was still half asleep, and all I could think of was answering the phone.
はい、園崎です。
朝早くにすみませんな。君吉でございます。おばあちゃんまだお休みですかな？
It was Uncle Kimiyoshi.
はい。昨日のが答えたみたいです。しばらく寝かせておこうと思います。
そうだね。無理に起こしちゃ悪いな。ミオンちゃんもこれから学校だよね。じゃあ枕元に伝言を置いといてもらってもいいかな。
I don't think we've heard the mayor's voice that often. I think we've only heard it once before in a phone call.
わかりました。何と伝言しましょう。
ね、昨日の件で緊急に役員会を開くことになったんだけど、それをね、今日の夕方の5時から神社の集会所でって伝えてもらえる？
わかりました。伝えておきます。
As soon as I put the phone down, it rang again.
はい、園崎です。
早朝から申し訳ありません。葛西と申しますが、ミオンさんですか？おはようございます。
葛西さんですか？おはようございます。
シオンさんはまだそちらにいらっしゃいますか？
I wasn't panicked, but I hesitated. I could tell him no, or I could play both Mion and Shion.
シオンはさっき顔を洗ってました。呼んできますね。
I decided to play 2 parts. I went back and forth down the hallway and picked up the phone again.
葛西？おはようです。
おはようございます、シオンさん。今日は登校されますか？
するわけないです。たるいし。
まあそんなとこだとは。それでシオンさん、沖宮へ帰る足はありますか？若いのに迎えに行かせますが。
君吉のおじいちゃんとかそのあたりに送ってもらおうかなと思ってます。私のことは放っておいてくれて OK です。
親父さんから出席日数だけは守らせるように厳命を受けていますので、私の小指のためにもご協力をいただきたいもんです。
まあ気が向いたら努力します。それより葛西、聞いてる？
聞いてるとは？
昨日のあれ。
一応は恐ろしい話です。
これまでのたたりの犠牲者はさ、みんなダム戦争の時の戦犯だったわけじゃない？それが今年はちょいと路線が違う感じですよね。どう思う？
さあ、
Interesting.
私の預かり知るところの話ではありません。
Right, I keep forgetting. This is the fifth year. Yeah, it's the fifth year, and that's when Tomitake and Takano were found dead. And in this case, the death, or the way they were found dead, or their death was caused by Tomitake clawing his throat out, and Takano being burned alive in an oil drum and then dropped, like, just in the mountain somewhere. Kasai wasn't the type to talk too much. If it was about something complicated, he usually responded like that.
昨夜の犠牲者の2人がどうしてお社様のたたりを受けたか知ってる？
いいえ。
実は昨夜ちょっと聞いた話だと、なんか綿流しの最中に最後殿にこっそり忍び込んだらしいよ。鍵を針金か何かで開けて。
Kasai went silent for a while. I held my breath while waiting to see how he responded. I expected him to say that he couldn't believe those people were chosen as victims just for sneaking into a storehouse. I expected him to say that it was just too unrealistic.
そうですか。バカなことを。
あまあ富武さんもそのあたりには疎いよそ者だったってことだね。
I went along with Kasai, but I felt disturbed on the inside. Kasai didn't wonder why breaking into the ritual storehouse would justify their deaths. I'd known Kasai for a long time, which is why I knew there was a heavy meaning to what he said.
でさ、葛西、実はさ、私もなんだけど。
入ったんですか？
うん。
西宮殿に？シオンさんが？
高野さんに一緒にどうって誘われてさ、高野さんと富武さん、そして私と、ほら、前原屋敷に引っ越してきた圭一って男の子と一緒に4人で。
I heard Kasai sighing heavily. Even though he didn't say a word, I could tell he was shocked. I'd never known him to act this way before.
シオンさん、去年ああいう一件があったばっかりなんですよ。今度はどうけじめをつけられるおつもりですか？
去年が爪3枚だったから奮発して5枚くらいいっとく？あ、ごめん。でもふざけてるわけじゃないんだよ。そりゃ私だってヤバいとこだって認識はあったよ。少しは。でもさ、そこまでヤバいことなわけ？
シオンさんは仮にも園崎本家に縁ある方です。今さらそんなこと言ってまかり通ると思いますか？
っていうか、だって私ずっと沖宮。ばあさんに嫌われて以降、ひなみ沢にはほとんど近づいてもいない。その上、学園に閉じ込められて過ごしてたんですよ。そんなの私が知るはずないじゃない。
Heard another sigh from Kasai. That sigh told me my excuses would be useless.
シオンさん、私はあなたの味方のつもりです。極力シオンさんを信じてあげたいと思っています。ですが、いくら私でもかばいきれないことがあります。第一、
ごめん。お願いが来たから切ります。
Mm-mm.
じゃあね。
Click. I interrupted Kasai and hung up. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear Kasai reject me. He who had been my ally all my life.
チェ参ったなあ。
I could hear the sound of the cicadas. The sound made it feel like I was being cooked on a huge frying pan making a sizzling noise. I couldn't help feeling remorseful. Now I knew that sneaking into the ritual storehouse wasn't a laughing matter. But I really didn't know it at the time. Sure, the door was locked, so they didn't want anyone to go in. Then why did they change the lock? What did they say? I think it was that Rika said that the previous lock was too heavy for her, so she had it changed to that cheap one. That was how Takano broke in. If the heavy lock was still there, this wouldn't have happened. I slapped my own forehead. Then I took a deep breath. Also, hey Moon, thanks for stopping by. Yeah, I wish it was Thursday too, so I could not go to work. Anyway. I had to calm down. What was the point of fussing now? I'd already passed the point of no return. There was no use of thinking otherwise. Yeah, considering all we've done so far. Exactly, yeah, the hag was already dead. Even if she wasn't, she was now at the bottom of the well. Therefore, it was already past the point where I could just cut my fingers off in apology. Felt so unstable. I'd walked on the fence around the swings of the park as if I was walking on a tightrope. It was fun because even if I fell, it was only a very short distance. But it wouldn't have been fun if I were up really high. Fine, I'll time you out real quick. Jeez. There we go. Anyway, at that very moment, I was in fact already on a tightrope that was a lot higher than the fence at the park. As soon as I took a step, the rope behind me would vanish. I couldn't step back because there was nothing behind me. That was, in short, the current situation I found myself in. Just standing in one spot was all I could do. Even if I never took another step, I'd fall if I wasn't careful. If I forced myself to walk, the danger would only increase. But if I didn't move, I would fall eventually. I could see what was ahead of me. There was no guarantee that I'd ever find firm ground. But if I stopped, there was only one fate awaiting me. I have to move onward. If staying here guaranteed death, then I'd rather try to walk even if I die as a result. Even if there was a dead end ahead of me, at least I tried my hardest. In general, I try to be optimistic. I could accept my life not lasting particularly long, but I wouldn't go easily. I'd struggle as much as possible. I'd already killed the hag. For that, there could be no other punishment than death. I knew my life would end soon. In other words, I was actually already dead.
死人がなおもあがこうとしたら、そりゃ特攻あるのみでしょ。
I clenched my fists tightly as I muttered. Even if I had to die, I couldn't die easily. This was my chance to avenge Satoshi. Who did it, for what purpose, and why? I was going to investigate. I was going to question. I was going to expose. Yes, I was going to settle the score. I'd carry out the plan I came up with yesterday. I could hide the hag's death somehow. All I'd have to say is that she hadn't been feeling well since the Watanagashi. I could do it all while pretending to be Mion. Just in case her friends at school became suspicious, maybe I'd start telling them I hadn't been feeling well either. In fact, I did feel groggy from my lack of sleep. When I became Mion, Shion would automatically disappear. I'd already told Kasai that I snuck into the shrine storage, so he'd probably end up telling people I was demoned away due to the curse of Oyashiro-sama. The last person I'd have to think about was the fourth one who snuck into the ritual storehouse, Keiichi. Maybe I can use him as bait to lure out the enemy. Sorry, Kei. You're gonna be my bait. Now, what's confusing me a bit here is, if you remember in Chapter 2, Shion was already in Hinamizawa. As in, she would be a character that would show up every now and again after we met her back in Okinomiya. Because Keiichi went with his father to that cafe and met Shion there. You know, she was the waitress. So ever since then, Shion and Keiichi were quote-unquote dating. Right? They started kind of going out every now and again. Shion was doing this to kind of piss off her sister, while Keiichi was doing it because he thought Shion was Mion. Because again, they're twins. So the thing that confuses me is this part right here. It's the Watanagashi festival. Before the Watanagashi, Shion and Keiichi were going out every now and again. The other thing that happens is after the Watanagashi, Keiichi and Shion still keep going out. They still keep meeting up. And I believe it was in chapter 8, which is shortly after the Watanagashi chapter, which I believe was chapter 7 or chapter 6 in chapter 2. We end up meeting up with Shion. Shion confesses her feelings for us or something. And she's like, hey, if you really love me, will you buy me, like, a gift? I want this doll from this, like, window. And Keiichi's like, okay, I'll buy it for you. As they go into the store to buy the doll for her, Mion is on the other side. And she starts freaking the fuck out because Keiichi is walking into the store with a doll, while Shion has her arms around Keiichi's arm. So Mion is alive, and not in the cage, like she is at this very moment. So the thing is, what the fuck is going on? Because all of those events happened, again, in Chapter 2. And now here we are in Chapter 5, trying to get answers for what I assume is Chapter 2 and what happened before Keiichi showed up with Satoshi and everything. I'm so fucking confused, because where the fuck is Mion gonna come out? Like, where's she gonna pop out from? And how are they gonna have these, like, banters back and forth? Unless it's, like, a different timeline after all? Or something else is going on? I'm not 100% sure. It's fucking weird. Anyway. I felt a little bad since I was starting to like him. With all that figured out, let's go to school. I'd go to school as Mion before. Well, I'd gone to school as Mion before, so I knew how things worked. It was almost time to leave the house.
兄ちゃん、遅い遅い。待っててくれたわけ？先に行っちゃってもよかったのに。
あれ、ミオン。
Oh, this is the first time I think we've seen Keiichi in his school uniform. So, which is literally just a white shirt. But let's see him like this. Ugh, I still can't get over this fucking art style looking like garbage. Why the fuck did they do this to the characters? Anyway.
お前、顔が赤くないか？息も妙に荒いし。
みーちゃん、ひょっとして具合悪くない？
Lena put her hand on my forehead.
レナの手、冷たいな。みーちゃん、ちょっとだけど熱あるよ。そんな大したことないよ。半日もすればケロッと治っちゃうって。
本当に大丈夫かよ。
I don't think we've seen this face.
あんまり無理するなよ。
あれ、ケイちゃん、気遣ってくれるの？嬉しいな。
I'd always thought he was a goofball, so I was a little surprised. I thought they would tease me, but they didn't.
無理しない方がいいと思うな。先生にはお休みだって伝えとくよ。大丈夫大丈夫。風邪薬も飲んだし、すぐに効いてくると思うから。
じゃあ行こうか。くれぐれも無理するなよ。って言いながら、時間！
走らないと間に合わない。 スリリングな朝になっちゃったね。鈍った体にはちょうどいいカツかもね。走ろう。
That's cute. But yeah, those lines were basically the same ones from
それでは委員長、
from
号
the
令。
novel, or at least from chapter 2, if you recall. That's basically what happened. Like, Shion one day shows up and she's like kind of sick.
起立、気をつけ。
I made the same mistake before. I never learned, do I?
みーちゃん本当に大丈夫かな。今日は具合悪そう。
あら、そうなんですの。それはよくありませんわね。
It was a good idea to make them believe I was sick. Even if I did things differently from Mion, I had an excuse.
まあ、あれだ。女の子には体調が悪くなる日もあるってことだな。
Oh no.
僕にはそんな日はないのですよ。みぱー。
Mion's friends kept each other occupied and left me alone. Maebara Keiichi. He might suddenly disappear one day. I couldn't let that happen. That would be like letting a fish take the bait and swim away while I was fast asleep with a fishing pole in my hands. I couldn't miss the moment the enemy took a bite out of Keiichi. I had to be very careful. But it was impossible to keep my eyes on him 24/7. Spying on him at school like this wasn't good enough. Should I have him meet with Shion and let her explain that he's in danger? Maybe we could set up a strategy together. I didn't think Keiichi realized how serious a crime it was to step into the ritual storehouse. I mean, I hadn't after all. Since last year, all the incidents that related to the curse had probably been investigated in secret. People involved with the three families would know about the incident from last night, but Keiichi shouldn't know anything. If he knew where he stood now, he'd be more cautious too. That should make him aware of his surroundings, or maybe he would notice if anything odd took place. The teacher caught him sleeping, so she ordered him to go wash his face. He walked out into the hallway. I'm trying to remember. I think at this point Keiichi was also having problems sleeping. Just like how Shion was having problems sleeping last night. I believe Keiichi was at this point as well. I think he starts hearing footsteps. Or he starts worrying about whether or not what he did was right. I was sleepy too. I had to be alert, but I couldn't clear my mind due to my lack of sleep. I decided to go home early. Since I've been pretending to be sick since morning, my request was approved. As I exited the building, I saw Keiichi washing his face. I think this was after he met with Oishi. I believe Oishi manhandles him here? Or was that with Satoko in chapter 3?
やっぱケイちゃんはこっちの流しを選んだか。表の方が気分いいもんね。
あ、ミオンか。
Oh, right. The face is so different for like the console art style. Hold on. Ugh. God, this is so gross. Back to normal.
授業、サボるなよな。
It looked like it felt refreshing for him to wash his face with cold water. I washed my face too. But it didn't feel as good as it looked.
ミオン、風邪の方はいいのかよ。眠いのは寝不足じゃなくて、風邪薬の副作用なんだろ？
ん？あはは。実は内緒なんだけど、昨日はお祭りの後で親族の宴会に巻き込まれちゃってさ。
Yeah, and what did you do, Mion?
それでエンドレスに。
I pretended to drink with an invisible glass.
徹夜明けかよ。心配して損した。
Keiichi exaggerated his reaction, but he still seemed worried.
じゃあな、俺は教室に戻るぜ。帰りは気をつけろよ。ふらふらして、側溝や用水路に落ちるなよ。
Don't wobble into a sewer. Keiichi turned around to go back to the classroom.
そうそう、ケイちゃん。
I stopped Keiichi. He, in response, turned around.
なんだ？
変なことを聞くけど、深く考えないで答えてね。
そりゃ内容によりけりだな。
昨日の綿流しの晩さ、富武さんと高野さんに会わなかった？
Right. When Keiichi came to school, I believe when he was out here, before Mion showed up, he was interrogated by Oishi. I believe it was Oishi who asked him, hey, have you seen these two people anywhere? And he says, no. I believe that's what it was. And now, here we have Keiichi being asked by Mion, have you seen them anywhere? Did you see them during the Watanagashi? I noticed Keiichi's body tense up. His reaction proved that he felt guilty about sneaking into the ritual storehouse. He was frightened that Mion Sonozuki might know about it. I guess this was enough to give him a certain impression of Mion Sonozuki.
富武さんと高野さんはわかるよね。ほら、ケイちゃん、お祭りの前日準備の時、シオンと一緒に4人でお話ししてたでしょ？
I could clearly see how dismayed Keiichi felt. He was trying to come up with an excuse.
さあ、どうかな。あったような、合わなかったような。
He was both a bad liar and a bad actor. He wasn't really that intelligent at all. Well, that would make him a suitable friend for Mion. He was just a brat, unlike Satoshi. Although, when it came to lying and acting, Satoshi was at about the same level. Maybe Keiichi should be credited for at least trying to tell a lie. Satoshi wouldn't have even said a thing. I didn't need to be thinking about him right now.
そう。じゃあもう一つ質問ね。同じく昨べ、シオンに会わなかった？
This was a very mean question. Keiichi was perplexed as I'd expected.
それ、昨日も聞いたよな。俺、あったかどうかわからないって答えたと思ったぜ。
Eh? I had asked him that yesterday? He must have meant that Mion Sonozuki asked him that question. In other words, she asked him that after he left the storehouse and got back together with his friends. Damn you, Mion. When I asked her, she had said she had no idea we went into the ritual storehouse. Shit.
そうだっけ？また改めて聞いたら違う答えが返ってくるかなって思ってさ。
どうしてあったかどうかをそんなに気にするんだよ。
Yeah, Shion. Why are you so intent on knowing? He was getting defensive. Keiichi couldn't hide his pain as he flared up at me.
大したことじゃないの。富武さんと高野さんと悪く言ってる人たちがいるの。何が悪いんだかはよく聞いてないんだけどね。
Keiichi was really perplexed now. This wasn't fun at all. But it could still be an interesting game.
私、ケイちゃんが悪いことをするなんて信じてないから。でも、ちょっとだけ聞いてみたかったから聞いてみたの。不愉快な思いをさせてごめんね。
I made sure Keiichi felt a sense of crisis, then left. Nobody can tell us apart. We're Mion and Shion, perfect twins. Notebook page 186. When I returned to the Sonozuki house, I saw a woman with an apron on. It was a housekeeper. Her name was Shimiko-san. The hag had a few housekeepers who took care of the chores around the house.
ミオンちゃん、本当によかった。
ありゃ、シミコさん。何かご用で？
Today was her turn to come help out at the house. She'd arrived, but the gate was locked and couldn't get in. She called, but there was no answer, so she had just been standing there not knowing what to
バッ
do.
チャですね。綿流しの祭りで面白くないことがあったみたいで、昨べからすごく機嫌が悪いんです。
ああ、そうですか。
Shimiko tried to remember if she had done something wrong.
別に無視してるんじゃなくて、寝込んでるだけなんです。昨べ、だいぶ遅くまでカリカリしてたから、多分まだ起きられないんじゃないでしょうか。知ってるでしょ？一度機嫌を損ねたバッチャが、どれだけの期間機嫌が悪いかを。
そうですね。
しばらく顔を見せない方がいいと思います。シミコさんに悪気がなくても、バッチャは何かと咎めてくるに違いありませんから。こういう時は私に任せといてください。
そうですか？それは助かりますけど。
シミコさん、申し訳ないんですけど、他のお手伝いさんにもしばらく来なくていいと伝えてもらっていいですか？バッチャの機嫌が治ったらこっそり電話しますから。しばらくそっとしてあげてください。
Shibiko bowed, then left on her bicycle. Anyone who ever experienced Granny's wrath would understand. Oh boy. I headed into Mion's room, set her alarm clock for 2 p.m., and crawled into her bed. I needed to recover quickly. I had to be sharp, calm, and cool-headed. School should be out by 2 p.m. Maybe I'd get in touch with Keiichi. I'd have to call him. There would also be a staff meeting at the Furude Shrine Assembly Hall in the evening. All the leaders of the 3 families, their relatives, and the town council members would gather at this meeting. They were all authority figures in Hinamizawa. I'd be attending in place of the hag who was sick. I'd worry about the rest when I got there. People shouldn't notice that Mion and the hag were missing for a long time. I didn't need to worry as I had plenty of time. I checked the alarm once more, then fell asleep as if someone switched me off.
もしもし。
園崎の妹の方です。こんにちは。今はお時間大丈夫ですか？
シオンか。ミオンと同じで、今日は寝不足で寝込んでるんじゃないかと思ったぜ。
え？ひょっとしてお姉、早退ですか？お姉らしい。
Keiichi had no idea that the Mion he saw earlier was actually me. He didn't notice when we talked in person, so there was no way he would notice on the phone. What's really funny though is when we had the post-chapter discussion for this chapter, I believe Billy had mentioned something along the lines of, one thing that Ryukishi wants you to consider is it possible for the twins to actually swap places? And if so, where would they swap places? Like, when would that happen? And I kept thinking to myself, I don't believe there even was a place or a time in which they would swap places. Because I was so convinced that both of them were separate people. Because the game kept, Chapter 2 kept trying to toy with the idea that Mion and Shion were the same person. But if you count like the hair strands on each bang, I'm kidding. So you can't really tell them apart even by their model, you can only tell them apart by their voice. And I believe it's the same CV that does the voice for both of them. She just speaks in a lighter voice, and then Mion is a little more brash, a little more cocky, you know. So seeing all this be revealed now, again, is like very interesting. I'm still wondering how we're gonna get to the point where we get to the shop and tease Mion. I don't know how the fuck that's gonna happen. But, you know. Anyway. He didn't notice when we talked in person, so there was no way he would notice on the phone. I never knew that playing 2 roles would be so much fun. To feel such enjoyment in this game of life or death, maybe I was getting used to the situation. Or maybe my senses had gone numb.
ごめんな。ちょっと親が電話待ちをしてるんで、そんなに長話はできないんだ。何の用だ?
Right. I remember this. I believe Keiichi was told, hey, we're waiting to hear from someone from Tokyo. Can you not use the phone?
お話ししたいことがあったんですけど、長電話が無理じゃ仕方ないですね。
じゃあさ、会って話をしないか。ついでに図書館にも案内してもらえるとありがたい。
And he also needed to return some books.
図書館って駅前の私立図書館ですか？別にいいですよ。バイトのついでってことで。
We decided to meet in Nokinomiya. It wasn't easy to get there from Hinamizawa, but I had to hurry. I couldn't run into Keiichi as he was heading there himself. I recalled that the key to the hag's motorcycle was in the secret drawer. The hag usually got driven around for public events, but when she had her own errands, she rode her motorcycle. That too. So again, I'm trying to remember if Keiichi was asked by Oishi at school if he saw Tomitake and Takano, because Oishi's about to show up again, which isn't really much of a spoiler if you've read chapter 2 already. You know where this is going. Keiichi, I assumed, was going to ride his bicycle, so I tried getting to Okinomiya before he did. Keiichi arrived quite a bit later than me. Motorcycles are faster after all. There was hardly any traffic lights to worry about on the way here either.
ミオンと違って、シオンは待ち合わせ時間を守るな。しみじみ。
お姉を標準にされるといろいろと困ります。
ん？少しフラフラしてないか？お前も昨べは寝不足だろ？隠しても無駄だぞ。で、学校を早退したに違いない。
残念でした。私はそもそも今日はずる休みしてますので。私、お姉より要領いいですから。
おいおい。学校をずる休みするのを要領いいとは言わないと思うぞ。
じゃあ先に用事を片付けます？時間もそんなにないですから。図書館へ行くんですよね。
ああ、頼むよ。お袋の借りてる本の返却期限が今日までらしいんで。
Right, so when Mion had to go, it's because she had to go to the town meeting as Mion. Or when Shion had to go, she had to do it as Mion. And that's why this conversation can't be, too long. Yes, she did try to cuck her own sister. She tried getting really close to Keiichi. And, Keiichi would try to be nice to Shion. Thinking, well, because, the whole thing is that Keiichi, the guy in front of us, kept thinking that the girl he's talking to right now is just the girl from school, Mion. But she took on a persona called Shion because that's her girlier side, instead of being a tomboy. But he didn't know that they were actually twins, even though Shion kept telling Keiichi, hey, I'm Mion's twin sister. And he's like, yeah, I see. And then at this point, she's like, well, I might as well try to fuck with my sister if she really likes this guy.
図書館は遠いのか？
すぐ近くですよ。
I meant it when I said we didn't have much time. I had to hurry a little. I was just going to talk to him on the phone, but I ended up coming all the way to Okinomiya. After our talk, Keiichi would slowly head back to Hinamizawa on his bicycle. I'd have to rush back there while making sure I didn't run into him. Otherwise, I couldn't make it on time for the meeting. Maybe I could be a little late, but since I needed to hear everything they were going to discuss, I didn't want to be. This was the Shishibune Public Library. It was sizable, filled with a collection of moldy, smelly books. But they did have air conditioning, and it was quiet. It was the perfect place for when you wanted to be alone. After Satoshi disappeared last year, I came here a lot to think about various things. This was where I first met Takano. I didn't want to run into her with Keiichi in tow, but then I remembered that she was already dead. What a fucking line. The first floor of the building was occupied by government offices. The library itself was on the second floor, so we had to walk up a huge staircase to get there. I tasted cool air on my skin as soon as I walked through the automated door. Unlike outside, it was very quiet in here. The room temperature was both comfortable and suitable for books. I could smell the scent of old pages.
どこの図書館も似たようなもんだな。
Keiichi walked up to the return table after he said so. Because it was a weekday, there was hardly anyone around. It really was very quiet. I was going to chat about some ordinary things, and then move on to the main subject. After Keiichi returned the books, I invited him into the inner section of the library. Keiichi knew Mion well, but he didn't know me at all. He showed an interest in our life story. It was exactly where Takano told me. Oh, hold on. Just double check. Kick didn't, or Twitch didn't crash. No, we're still good. Okay. This is exactly where Takano told me about the true history of Hinamizawa a year ago. I was about to tell Keiichi about things that were very similar to that. Did God have a sense of irony?
言われてみれば、例のおもちゃ屋も親類の人が経営してるみたいだったな。そういえば、エンジェルモートも親類の人が経営してるんじゃないのか？
I told him the reason why the Sonosuke family was so powerful in this area. I assumed that since Keiichi came from the city, there was a good chance he couldn't even begin to understand how one old family could literally control an entire area. Unless I explained to him how powerful the Sonozuki family was, he wouldn't understand what kind of danger was barreling towards him.
特に金融不動産関係は強いですね。あと商工会議所の役員も何割かは園崎姓かその親類がついてます。沖宮一帯を評伝に市議会議員と県議会議員にも園崎がいますし。
ちょっと待て。なんだかすごい話になってきたぞ。沖宮の町中に親類が経営する店があって、特に金融不動産に強い。しかもその上商工会議所の役員の何割かが親類で、しかも地元選出の議員までいて。
Yeah. Keiichi counted with his fingers. He was clearly surprised to hear all about the Sonozuki family. It seemed he was flexible enough to accept even something that sounded outrageous to him. He was starting to understand things, although slowly. The way he viewed Shion Sonozuki was changing little by little too. That should be enough background information. Now I could go on to explain about Mion Sonozuki, the successor. Then I'd change the subject like Takano did with me. I'd go on to talk about the curse of Oyashiro-sama and then the series of mysterious deaths.
ひょっとして園崎家ってこの辺り一帯じゃすごいんじゃ。
ねえ、すごいんです。
And here is Oishi. A fat man with a cigarette suddenly cut into our conversation. You can't smoke in the library. Oishi. Why was he here?
どうも。こんにちは。今日はデートですかな？羨ましいですね。
そうだと思ったら邪魔しないでほしかったですね。おいさん。
What timing? It couldn't be a coincidence. I knew this man too well. He was crafty, sly, and clever. His presence here just can't be a coincidence. Did he see us somewhere in town and followed us? But why? Did he need something from me, Keiichi, or perhaps the both of us? From what I could guess, I didn't think it was me that he wanted something from. It was almost like he was trying to keep Keiichi away from me. Oishi was aware I gave a false testimony to protect Satoshi last year. Maybe he didn't think he could talk to Keiichi if I was around. Why did Oishi need to talk to Keiichi? It must be about the incident from yesterday. I'm sure there were plenty of plainclothes officers at the festival, so they had to have seen who was last with the victims. In other words, Keiichi and me. But Oishi knew I was hard to deal with. That's why he was focusing on Keiichi at present. Why did he have to show up at a time like this?
前原さんでしたよね。あなたもタフな人ですね。
タフ？
園崎姉妹を二股かけるなんて。
いや、そんな二股だなんて。
Keiichi looked at me, hoping for assistance. He blushed. The way he panicked reminded me of Satoshi. That aside, this wasn't going well. Oishi might even start talking about my relationship with Satoshi. I didn't want him to, nor did I want Keiichi to have any preconceptions. Oishi took a quick glance at me. Oh, he's looking smug as fuck. His eyes told me something. He was purposefully talking about the things I'd rather not talk about. He was basically telling me to leave, or he'd continue on to something that was worse than what they were currently talking about. He didn't use words, but his eyes clearly communicated that anyway. Damn that big fat weasel.
あ、ごめんなさいケイちゃん。私もうバイトの時間なんです。
え、あ、そうなのか？
I realized that I wouldn't achieve anything like this, even if I stayed longer, so I used my part-time job as an excuse to leave. Oishi looked at me and grinned. Damn it. He won today, but I'll win next time.
そういえば、今日はシオン、何か話があるんじゃなかったのか？なんなら。
うん、また今度。あ、バイトが終わったら電話します。夜なら電話大丈夫ですよね？
ああ、大丈夫だと思う。
じゃあ、今夜電話しますので、その時に。じゃあ。
And that's the halfway point. Right? This isn't the chapter end, right? Okay, good. The hack's motorcycle had become my primary means of transportation. My next stop was the staff meeting at the Furude Shrine. My next stop was the staff meeting at the Furude Shrine's assembly hall. It was easy to imagine how a normal meeting would play out if it were just celebrating the end of the Watanagashi. But today's staff meeting was likely going to be as strained as the Sonoseki family councils. Yes, the staff meeting was going to deal with the heart of Hinamizawa. I couldn't let my guard down even for a moment. I rested for a while at the house, then left for the meeting. I walked up to the long stairs at the Furude Shrine. At the top, I saw some elderly men smoking in front of the hall. Since they had a minor fire a long time ago, it had been made into a non-smoking area. Like when reading that sentence, I was so fucking confused by what the hell they were trying to say. For a second, I was like, they had a minor fire? Are they holding a minor fire? And then they meant in the area. The head of the Kimiyoshi family, Uncle Kimiyoshi, noticed me and waved, so Mayor Kimiyoshi. He must have not expected Mion to come alone. Normally, it would have been either the hag by herself or Mion tagging along with an assistant.
バッチャは夕べのあれ以来機嫌を相当悪くしちゃいまして、誰も近づけず布団にこもりきりです。
They all understood how troublesome she was when she was in a bad mood. They smiled bitterly in sympathy.
今日はミオンちゃんが園崎家当主代行ということでいいね。お嬢さんから話とか聞いてる？
一応。
What did he mean by, has Oryu-san told you anything? That line by itself didn't really explain much. The staff meeting was usually led by the mayor, the head of the Kimiyoshi family, and he had asked me, as the substitute for the Sonoseki family head, if I had heard anything from her. Then I realized who was supposed to lead today's staff meeting.
おじじゃなくて、君吉さん、今日の会合だけど、司会、私じゃないと。
According to the ranking order at the family councils, any substitute for the Sonoseki family head is above the Kimiyoshi family head. In other words, I'd have to lead today's meeting. There was no way I could do that.
大丈夫大丈夫。おじいちゃんがやるから。ミオンちゃんは座ってればいいよ。お嬢さんから聞いてる話があったら話してくれればいいからね。
村長、そろそろ始めますかいね。全員揃いましたね。
The smokers put out their cigarettes and went back into the hall. The tables were set in a horseshoe shape, and I was told to sit next to the chair reserved for the chief. The seat opposite of mine was empty. Considering its location, it was probably for the Furude family head, Rika Furude. But somebody said earlier that everybody was already here. Either Rika called in absent, or the seat was just a formality. Knowing the subject of this meeting, I don't think the Furude family head would even want to attend. Even if Rika actually attended, she wouldn't be able to say anything. All she'd usually do at the Sonoseki family councils was draw pictures on a notepad. She would probably end up drawing pictures in this meeting too. Besides, they probably didn't want her to hear anything unpleasant. In this way, the empty Furude family seat was easily explained. When everybody was seated, the head of the Women's Association served tea. She gave me an evil look trying to tell me to help out. I got up and did so. After that, everyone felt quiet, and the secretary stood up.
それでは皆さん、本日は大変お忙しい中、緊急にお集まりいただきまして、誠にお疲れ様です。それでは初めに、村長さんからご挨拶をいただきます。村長、どうぞ。
Oh boy. So now everything's gonna be revealed. We've never heard one of these, like, town meetings. We've only heard the Sonoseki family meetings. Or at least a little bit of them from the start of the chapter. So I'm fucking nervous to see where this goes. Also, before I forget, I don't think we've seen this background, but just in case, or just in case we hadn't, here it is. And then that's what it looks like from the console version. Which is very different. Again, I think we have seen this background before, but I commented on how, like, it is a tatami room, but it looks like just a generic anime one instead of, you know, one like this, where you have a shrine in the middle of it. and you have some pictures, usually related to something involving either the deity or the family that lives here, as far as I know. So it's interesting.
座ったままで失礼します。ケンちゃんも座ったままでいいよ。今日は平日の夕方にお集まりいただきまして、また昨日は綿流しを本当にお疲れ様でございました。おかげさまで本年も事故もなく大変な盛況のうちに終了させることができました。祭りにも村中から大勢がいらっしゃり、本当に素晴らしい祭りになったものと思うとります。来たの何人だっけ？大本営発表だと5000人だそうです。
Everyone laughed except me.
今後もますますの文化の向上のために一丸となって頑張ってまいりたいと思います。
5,000 people is insane though. I think the village population was only like 1,000.
よろしくお願いいたします。
Pachi, pachi, pachi. An applause with only 8 people doesn't sound so great.
それでは引き続き議事の方に入ってまいりたいと思います。
Because what was it? I think the text for like pachi pachi pachi, if you want to like write it in like a chat, you just write 8, right? Because it sounds like hachi, which is 8. Hachi pachi, you know. So it's pretty funny that they're like, an applause with only 8 people doesn't sound so great.
本日の議事を君吉村長さんにお願いしようと思います。承認していただける方は拍手でご承認願います。ありがとうございます。それではただいま万座でのご承認をいただきましたんで、君吉村長さんに司会を譲りたいと思います。よろしくお願いします。
どうもケンちゃんお疲れ様。では司会を引き継ぎましたので、申し訳ない。カーテン閉めましょうかね。
Everyone closed the curtains nearest to them. The sun was still up, but with all the curtains closed, the room became very dark. The village chief explained the details of the incident, as well as what went on with the police. A police vehicle discovered Tomitake-san's body on the way back to Okinomiya last night. Oishi's special curse unit was standing by, expecting something to happen for the 5th time, so they responded quickly. Since Tomitake and Takano were rarely apart, Oishi got in touch with the neighboring prefectural police departments and asked them to look for her. As a result, they found a burned body of a woman in the mountains in the Gifu prefecture, and the body was identified as Mio Takano. Considering the circumstances, the police ended up labeling the incident as the fifth of the ongoing series of mysterious deaths. When he finished, there was dead silence. I watched to see who would speak first. Nobody said a thing. Then I noticed Kimiyoshi looking at me. Ah, this is where the head of the Sonozaki family would speak.
ミオンちゃん、お嬢さんは何か言ってたかい？
Everyone looked in my direction. I was sure they could see the hag in me.
園崎家当主代行、園崎ミオンです。本日は当主お寮に代わりまして、出席させていただきました。よろしくお願いいたします。
I became Mion. I tried to become as cold and unfeeling as the Mion I witnessed a year ago. That cold version of Mion was inside of me. That was me. I was her.
不幸にして、お社様のお怒りは5年目にも下されることになりました。大変悲しいことです。
Everyone was held captive by my words. I wasn't a little girl anymore. The hag was speaking through my mouth. They all heard me and trembled in fear.
どうして今年もたたりがあったか、わかる方はいますか？
After my question, everyone whispered to each other.
そう。西宮殿の金を犯し、土足で聖域を踏み荒らして汚れを持ち込んだからです。
なんいうことだ。
A few elderly men got up and yelled.
あ、ほんたれが。信じられん小僧どもだ。
腹渡引き裂いても飽きたりんガキ友じゃん。
お社様、お怒りをお鎮めください。
なんてこと、なんてこと。お社様、お社様。
これだからよそ者すっか。なんも考えんねえ。ガクガクもないんよ。さらんと。
あれすってれんこってなるね。バチ当たりどもんが。
When you picture them responding, by the way, the ones that kept calling out to Oyashiro-sama or this one, the way they sounded made me think of, like, I believe that the way they were probably yelling, like, they probably yelled out first, and then they clasped their hands together, like in a prayer, and then they, like, hold their hands above their head while bowing a little bit, and then start, they start chanting, like, Oyashiro-sama, Oyashiro-sama, right, like, in prayer. That's normally how it works, at least in Japan, whenever it's exaggerated that a god's name must be invoked, or when they ask for, like, forgiveness, they do shit like that. I don't think, like, actual old people do this, or at least if they do, they don't do it anymore. But that's something to keep in mind, like, if we ever get a sentence like that again. Like, try to picture, like, old men doing that. Anyway, the angry old men yelled even as they trembled in fear. Their sudden change scared me more than a little. Even Uncle Kimiyoshi, who was usually so gentle and sweet, became like a demon of war, cursing those who broke the rule of the ritual storehouse. It had become like a raging ocean inside the assembly hall. Their yells spun about like a whirlpool. They roared, crashed, and howled. Even while doing nothing but watch, I could feel myself turning pale. Mion threatened me yesterday, and Kasai had been shocked this morning. What I saw before me was similar to that. Even the sweet and gentle Uncle Kimiyoshi was saying they deserved to die. I was fearful of the sudden change in those elderly men. More than anything, the fact that they'd all believe that those people deserved to die for trespassing is what terrified me. It wasn't just that, of course. The real thing I was scared of was that I was one of the people they wanted dead. In other words, it was almost like they were telling me to die of the curse. If they were to find out I snuck into the ritual storehouse, it was very possible that they would strangle me on the spot. Actually, they might not kill me that easily. By then, I was certain. The people in this room were true believers in Oyashiro-sama, just like the hag. They wouldn't hesitate to murder whoever made Oyashiro-sama angry on his behalf. Even if they didn't carry out the killing themselves, they would pretend they didn't see anything. Yes, not even if my head was cut off right in front of them. Everyone here would act in collusion and say that I never attended today. If they all testified that they waited and I didn't show, I'd be demoned away. It would be far too easy for them to erase someone and have them disappear. There was no mistake. The people linking the hag and the curse were definitely here at this meeting. I continued speaking. I was Mion Sonozaki. I was on the side responsible for the curse. Therefore, at that moment, I didn't need to worry about anything. Nobody could tell the difference between Mion and me. That's what would keep me safe.
お静かにお願いします。
ほら、静かに静かに。
Uncle Kimiyoshi helped me to quiet everyone, but his tone was violent. He really scared me. Everyone gradually became silent.
西宮殿に忍び込んだ賊は4人。あと2人います。
People once more became restless upon hearing that, but Uncle Kimiyoshi yelled at them again and they settled down.
富武さんと高野さんは分別のつくお年だったはずですからね。お社様のたたりが直ちに下りましたが、もう2人は子供です。まだたたりは免れていますが、何のけじめもなく許されることはありません。
Everyone stayed quiet that time. They all turned genuinely pale, trying not to miss a word I said. After all, they were all thinking that the kids I mentioned could be their own relatives, or even grandchildren. And they wanted to know who they were to put their minds at ease.
その2人の狼藉者は 園崎紫音、そして前原圭一。
I could feel the air getting drier. It was so dry, it almost felt like it was going to start making a crackling noise.
園崎紫音はすでに。
I couldn't even hear the old people breathe. I took a peek at Uncle Kimiyoshi, who was sitting next to me. He adored Shion as if she were his own granddaughter, but she had been demoned away. I wanted to see how distressed and sad he'd look. And when I saw his face, I felt a sensation on my back as if my skin itself was making a crackling noise. Or a cracking noise. He didn't even have an expression on his face. Uncle Kimiyoshi adored me. I loved him and I thought he loved me too. That was why I expected him to be saddened after learning that I met with such a cruel fate. What was I thinking? The memory of his warm smile shattered inside of me. There was no way of describing the fear I experienced in that moment. In mere words. He had suddenly changed into someone I didn't even recognize. Uncle Kimiyoshi noticed me looking at him and spoke.
もう一人の前原圭一は？
まだです。
I had to take a deep breath to regain my composure.
西宮殿を犯した4人、すべてにお社様はたたりを下されるでしょう。前原圭一も例外ではありませんよ。
Chilling looks, cruel looks, emotionless looks, shrewd looks, and the looks of people who were about to snap. I could feel the ogres chewing my words while they stared at me with their sharp eyes. I could see some of them sticking their snake-like tongues in and out. I could see flames in some of their eyes. They were memorizing the names of the intruder the curse had yet to fall upon. And so the meeting went on. We were told not to tell the police too much, to report what they asked us, and to hold another meeting whenever something of significance happened. If something unexpected took place, we were to get in touch with either the head of the Kimiyoshi family or the head of the Sonozaki family for instructions on what to do. With those closing remarks, the meeting was over. It was already getting dark outside. Being in the valley surrounded by mountains, once the sun went down in Hinamizawa, it got dark quickly. Even if it was hot during the day, it cooled down quickly at night. The elderly people said goodbye to each other and left on their bicycles, on their motorcycles, or in their cars. Uncle Kimiyoshi waved them goodbye and started to head home himself. I called out to him.
君吉さん、この後ご予定はありますか？
I called him Kimiyoshi-san instead of Uncle Kimiyoshi. He stopped.
いや、何もないよ。
うちへ寄ってもらえませんか？
お嬢さんが呼んでるのかい？
はい。直接会って話したいことがあるんだとか。
Ah.
じゃあやるかな。
Uncle Kimiyoshi arrived at the Sonozaki house. He often came to the house to have secret meetings with the hag, so he wasn't suspicious at all. I invited Uncle Kimiyoshi into the living room. I served him a cup of tea and told him I was going to fetch the hag. I left the room and killed some time down the hallway.
ばっちゃ、着替えたから来るそうです。ちょっと時間かかるかもです。
いやいや。ゆっくり待ってるから。
Uncle Kimiyoshi relaxed as he sipped his cup of tea. I sat next
多
to him.
分、シオンの話じゃないかなと思います。
I mentioned my name and watched for his reaction. Uncle Kimiyoshi looked so grim. I couldn't even tell if he heard me. I decided to continue speaking until he reacted in some way.
シオンは去年がありますからね。北条家の人間なんかと懇意になるなんて。
去年は、爪を剥いで許してもらったんだったね。
ええ、3枚剥いで。
Uncle Kimiyoshi folded his arms and thought for a while.
シオンちゃんは、今は
地下にいます。
様子はどうなんだい？
Uncle Kimiyoshi sounded worried. When I heard that, I felt relieved that Uncle Kimiyoshi was on my side. His anger in the assembly hall was just an act.
ずっと泣いていますよ。
ミオンちゃん、率直なところ、お嬢さんはシオンちゃんのことをどうするって言ってるんだ？
具体的なことは聞いてません。ご存知と思いますけど、バッチャは怒りが度を超えると逆に無口になりますからね。
うん。
西宮殿に入ったんだもんな。しかも自分とこの身内がな。そりゃそうだろうな。
Uncle Kimiyoshi thought that the hag must be unsure of what to do with Shion.
おじいちゃんはシオンの処遇どうなると思います？
そりゃ爪3枚よりもっとむごいことになるだろうな。お嬢さんのことだから身内に甘くするってことはないと思う。
うん。
むしろ身内だからこそ厳しく当たるだろうからな。
何しろ西宮殿に入ったんですものね。それは許されないことでしょうね。
さすがにな。西宮殿はな。
でもシオンもかわいそうかもしれません。だってずっとひなみ沢から遠ざけられてきたんです。西宮殿の不可侵性は知ってはいたでしょうが、そこまでいけないことだという認識は多分なかったんでしょうから。
確かにシオンちゃんは不憫だよな。
あたしかシオンか。背中の入れ墨を見る以外に私たちをどんな方法で区別できるというのですか？何もない。ミオンとシオンなんて区別自体が何の意味もないのに。
Twins are proof of bad luck. One should be eliminated as soon as they are born. Such is the family precept. The hag actually put her hand around my neck right after I came out of the womb. That's how the story went, at least. In the end, the hag didn't kill me, but instead pretended I didn't exist. She forced herself to call one of us Mion and the other Shion. She adored Mion and hated Shion. My sister and I never understood why we had to go through that. We didn't care who was Mion or Shion, so one day we came up with an idea. We decided to share the joy Mion experienced with the sadness Shion experienced. We often switched places. We were both Mion and at the same time we were both Shion. Adults around us tried to put different clothes on us or style our hair differently so they could tell us apart. That was nonsense. No matter what they did to us, all we had to do was switch places and nobody could tell us apart. Finally, they decided that we switched places because we were always together. On that day, Shion got to go to an amusement park. Since then, we've been separated.
ミオンちゃん。
私にはシオンがどういう処遇になるか想像もつきません。そしてどんなことに決まっても意見できる立場にありません。バッチャは身内であればむしろ意見を聞かない人ですし。
そうだな。お嬢さんの悪いところだよ。
シオンは園崎シオンでなければとっくに殺されていたことでしょう。死に準ずる罰が果たしてどのようなものか私には想像もつきません。殺されなかったにしたって多分一生日の光を見ることはできないでしょう。つまりは鬼隠しということかと。
ミオンちゃん、シオンちゃんは反省してるんだろ？
ええ。
In response, Uncle Kimiyoshi tapped my shoulder and then slapped on his own chest. He smiled reliably.
大丈夫。シオンちゃんがちゃんと反省してるなら鬼隠しなんかなるもんか。君吉のおじいちゃんに任せなさい。
本当に大丈夫なんですか？
そりゃあお嬢さんは私に意見されたら怒りはするだろうけどさ。でもおじいちゃんは引かないよ。シオンちゃんがしっかり反省してるんだから許してあげてほしいってちゃんと頼んでみせるから。
Tears. began to fall from my eyes. I knew it. Uncle Kimiyoshi was my ally after all. He said he would forgive Shion. He was my ally. I was so very happy.
本当に去年の北条聡君みたいに鬼隠しになっちゃったりしないでしょうか。
Uncle Kimiyoshi smiled reliably again and told me.
罰当たりの北条家の坊主ならいざ知れず、園崎家のしおんちゃんならきっと許してもらえるって。
Oh no. はあ？
北条家の坊主って聡君のことですか？去年の犠牲者の。
北条の連中は仕方ないさ。村を丸ごと売ろうとした売国と同然のやつらだ。そういうやつらなら鬼隠しだってありえるだろうけど、そりゃあ北条家だからの話だよ。
はあ？はあ？
北条家の連中は一族老頭みんな呪われて当然だ。鬼隠しに会うのはそういう連中なんだから。だからしおんちゃんは大丈夫。大丈夫なんだよ。
おじいちゃん、でも聡君は去年シオンがけじめをつけたから見逃してもらえることになったんじゃないの？
けじめ？なんの？
ほら、爪を3枚剥いだじゃないですか。笠井さん、吉郎おじさん、それから聡君で3人分3枚。
3枚ってそういう意味だったのかい？
はあ？ What?
3枚はそういう意味じゃなかったんですか？
いや、合ってるよ。関わった人間が3人だから3枚の爪でけじめとしたんだよ。そう私も聞いてるよ。でも笠井さん、吉郎さん、それからしおんちゃんで3枚だと聞いてたよ。
Oh. はあ？え？ What? Huh? What? I endured excruciating pain. The first one was my left pinky, then the ring finger, and then the middle finger. People held me down so I couldn't move, but I endured. I had to endure 3 nails. I didn't know which nail was for Satoshi. If my middle finger was for Satoshi, I'd have to endure until the middle finger was done so that Satoshi would be forgiven. That was why I endured. Even Mion said afterwards, everything was forgiven. Huh? 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 Mion, didn't you say Satoshi was forgiven? Didn't you? That's what I heard. I think that's what I heard. Or did I? Huh? Eh? Huh? I felt the air move. There shouldn't have been a breeze in the room, but I felt it anyway. The cold air stroked the back of my neck. That was when my true self stood right behind me and nodded. Although there was no wind, my hair billowed. The burning wickedness buried deep inside my eyes became visible.
どうして北条聡君は鬼隠しにあったのでしょう？聡君のご両親は確かに村を売ろうとしました。お社様のたたりがあったのは当然です。でも聡君はその両親の子供であっただけ。その聡君にどんな罪が？
みおんちゃん？
聡君にどんな罪があったのかと尋ねています。あなたはさっき罰当たりな北条家の坊主なら鬼隠しにあっても当然と言いました。鬼隠しにあっても当然などんな罪があったのかと聞いているのです。
Miyoshi didn't know what to say to the sudden question. He seemed dismayed.
聞かずともわかります。園崎お涼が決めたのです。お社様のたたりが及ぶのは北条の姓を持つすべての人間と決めたから。
待ってみやんちゃん。別にそういうことが決まってるわけじゃない。
決めたわけではないのですか？
そうだよ。そんなこと北条家にはお社様のたたりがいずれ下る。そういう話をおぼろげにしたことはあっても、そんなにはっきりとしたことを言及したことは一度もないし。
ではさっきあなたが口にした北条の坊主ならいざ知れずという言葉は何を根拠に出たものなのですか？
ごめんよみやんちゃん。あれは言い過ぎたよ。謝る。
そういうことです。北条家なら何があってもたたり。北条の名を冠していればどうなろうが知ったことではないというそういう考えが蔓延していることが問題なのです。サトシ君に罪があろうがなかろうが北条という姓があればそれで汚らわしい。そういう考えが蔓延していることが問題なのです。そしてあなたはその蔓延でいぶされた汚れた思考に汚染された迷信盲信。許せない。お前のような存在が許せない。お前のような奴がサトシ君たち一家を追い詰めてあんなにもすり減らして。サトシ君がかわいそう。本当にかわいそう。彼が何をしたの？何もしてない。何もやってない。ただ北条であっただけ。それにどんな罪が罰がたたりが呪いがどうして降りかからねばならなかったのか。一体サトシ君に何の罪があったというのか。
Kimiyoshi's upper body bent backwards and fell onto the floor. That was that. I put my stun gun back in my pocket. So, in case some of you forgot, the mayor goes missing tonight. After the town hall meeting, after everyone had left, he disappeared. And nobody knows where he went. Nobody knows what happened to him. Until now.
今、なんて言った？
ゆうべ、高野さんと富武さんが死んだんだそうです。高野さんは焼死体で、富武さんは自殺みたいな感じで、今朝知ったんです。お父さんが親類の人からの電話で話してるのを聞いて。
As I thought, Keiichi didn't know anything about what happened after the festival last
マ
night.
スコミに報道されないのは当然なんです。過去にそうだったから。
Keiichi insisted that unless he heard about it on the news, it couldn't be real. Unless it could be fact-checked. He didn't believe it. But the investigation into the series of mysterious deaths are done in secret now. Of course he didn't hear about it on the news.
村長とか、あと園崎家出身の金バッジが警察に思いっきり圧力をかけたんだって聞いてます。
じゃあつまり二人の死は秘密裏に処理されてしまったということか。
そういうことです。もちろん警察は捜査をしてますよ。でも秘匿捜査ということなので捜査活動にはかなりの制限が加えられているそうです。これは事実上の捜査妨害と言えるでしょうね。
信じられない。人が死んだのにそれが公にされずひそやかに処理されるなんて。
もっと噛み砕いて言うと、綿流しの夜に誰が死んでも公にはならないということです。
そんなバカな話があってたまるか。
ケイちゃん、私以前にお社様のたたりは村人が起こしてるかもしれないって言いましたよね。つまりそういうことなんです。このひなみ沢では毎年綿流しの夜にお社様のたたりということにして誰かを殺してもいい土壌がいつの間にか作り上げられているんです。
Yes, that's the truth about the series of mysterious deaths at Hinamizawa, also known as Oyashiro-sama's curse. On the day of the Watanagashi, 2 people will be killed. The perpetrators are using the curse of Oyashiro-sama as an excuse to kill one victim and make another disappear. That's why the curse of Oyashiro-sama takes place. That's what happens in Hinamizawa, and that's what happens with the curse. What Kimiyoshi said is all true. Infecting everyone with the idea that the enemy from the damn conflict deserved to die was the root of all this. That was the system of vague commands used in the Sonosuke family, created by its head, Oryo. One thing that must be mentioned about that command system is that the person giving the orders and the one executing them didn't need to interact in any way. Though Oryo was the commander, she never gave actual orders. She only had to expect something to happen. Every single one of the family council members around her would want to satisfy that expectation if given the chance. They didn't have to be proactive about satisfying it. They could be passive too. But when the chance arose, anyone who knew Oryo's intentions could potentially become the one to execute her orders. Therefore, Oryo would never know who actually executed her order, and none of the relatives knew it either. But they all knew that things would conclude just as Oryo wanted, and they could assume it was one of their own who did it for her. Right, I don't remember if I mentioned this, but I was thinking about this at one point, where if it was going to be someone committing the crime, it must have been someone from the council, and if it was going to be someone from the council, well, no one would know who it was, because, you know, that's how these guys work. Like, hear no evil, see no evil, you know? This passive support system was thoroughly effective, and it spread all over the village. Its ties became even tighter after the dam conflict. Anyone could be the one to execute Oryo's orders. Therefore, everyone supported each other. If someone did something, then the others would try to satisfy Oryo's expectations in different ways. For example, they'd come up with false evidence or otherwise passively interfere with an investigation. Even if they didn't know exactly who they were protecting, they'd still work together to protect whoever it was. Yes, I had finally figured out how it all worked. Phrased in a more organized manner, it would go as follows. The system of killing 2 people who were unwanted by the village each year required 3 elements. The first element was a region of solidarity. It was created during that long and unique history of Hinamizawa. The villagers' bonds became even tighter during the dam conflict. That was one of the conditions for this place to have a curse. It was an element that was already in the region, not one that could be created. The next element was having the same moral standards. This is a very important element, as the curse wouldn't have happened without it. Also, this element was created by Oryo Sonosuke herself, and that was why she could claim that the system was established by her own will. Having the same moral standards means that everyone everywhere acknowledges the same enemy. Even when everyone in the village joined together, it would be meaningless if they all didn't know exactly who the enemy was. During the dam conflict, Oryo Sonosuke made the identity of the enemy very clear to everyone. They couldn't just say that they were against the dam construction and that the government was their enemy. That wasn't clear enough. The government didn't really pinpoint who the enemy was, but Oryo made enemies out of the construction site itself, and therefore its manager. She chose targets that the villagers could see with their own eyes. They were clear and easy to understand. The villagers acknowledged that everyone at the dam construction site was their enemy, and that construction site manager was the enemy commander. Using the same method, she labeled one after another as an enemy of the village, practically cataloging a list of enemies to print into the villagers' minds. Earlier, I had used the term infecting for this phenomenon. Those infected by this idea were the people unconsciously giving the orders to commit murder. When the infection spread across the village, when all of Hinamizawa's residents acknowledged the same enemy, that's when Hinamizawa itself became a murderer. Oryo combined those 2 elements, a solidary region and having the same moral standards. Then selected the enemy and spread that notion throughout the village. The law would normally have punished both the one who committed the crime and the one who gave the order. But Oryo's system didn't require an order at all. Oryo just had to become concerned about the enemy she had pre-selected. But that alone wouldn't cause the curse to take place. Oryo's concern was like a safety device, and even when the safety device was off, the curse wouldn't occur unless there was a finger to pull the trigger. Interesting. The last necessary element was to set a date for execution, the night of the Watanagashi. The night to venerate Oyashiro-sama, the guardian deity of Hinamizawa. On that night, the curse of Oyashiro-sama falls upon 2 enemies of the village, and they disappear. Everyone in the village acknowledged that as a fact. In other words, if the same incident took place on any of the other 364 nights of the year, it would be nothing more than a murder case. But if it happened on the night of the Watanagashi, then it would transform into the curse of Oyashiro-sama. The idea that villagers are allowed to kill their enemies on the night of the Watanagashi had infected them. The villagers were the cells of this huge creature called Hinamizawa, and each cell would be taught who the enemy was. The set date was basically a green light for whoever was in the best position to kill the enemy. That was the truth of the curse of Oyashiro-sama. Therefore, the one who actually killed Satoshi isn't my enemy. The one who set up this murderous system and the one who named Satoshi's family as the enemy is my enemy. To use a broader definition, Hinamizawa itself is the very system of Oyashiro-sama's curse is my enemy. Sorry. To use a broader definition, Hinamizawa itself and the very system of Oyashiro-sama's curse is my enemy. I already killed the hag, the one who designed the system. Kimiyoshi, the one whose job it was to infect the villagers with the system, was already in my hands. I just had to find out who else was involved and how much. It was like pulling a weed while being very careful not to break its roots. I announced that Keiichi Maebara was one of the people who snuck into the shrine storage. I was certain that fact already spread throughout the underside of the village. In other words, Keiichi Maebara was an object of the curse of Oyashiro-sama now. Takano and Tomitage were found dead, having been killed in gruesome ways. That was the curse. In that case, they could demon away 2 more people as sacrifices to calm the anger of Oyashiro-sama. The set date for the curse was already over, but just like what happened to Satoshi, demoning away was allowed a little extra time. Something would happen to Keiichi within a few days. I'd wait patiently. Careful not to let my enemies simply take Keiichi, my bait. Keiichi had been yelling on the other end of the phone for some time. He kept yelling that he didn't want to go into the ritual storehouse to begin with. He claimed he was simply invited by Takano and me. Right, this is when Keiichi was like, Mion, and then he was like, this is all your fault. It's not my fault. I didn't want to do any of this. This is all your fault for dragging me into this. All of you kept trying to push me to go into the storehouse, but I kept saying no and no and no, and you kept pushing me and pushing me. He shouldn't be in danger because of that, he said. He was feeling a sense of crisis and tension. This was going to work. The livelier the bait, the easier it is to spot.
俺は全然関係ないんだぞ。どうすんだよ。どうすんだよ。どうやって責任を取ってくれるんだよ。おい、聞いて。
Shut up. I've heard enough of your pitiful tears. I hung up the phone. There was no point in talking to him when he got like that. Besides, I'd already achieved my goal, which was to make him realize the danger awaiting him. I took a deep breath, then called the house of the village chief.
はい、君吉です。
園崎です。どうです？村長さんは見つかりましたか？
ああ、ミオンちゃんか。片っ端から電話をかけてみたけど、ダメだよ。見つからないんだ。参ったな。どこで油売ってるのかな。
こっちでも心当たりにいろいろと問い合わせましたけど、全然。バッチャにも相談したんですが、青年団を招集して探し回った方がいいだろうということです。
こんな時間にかい？
This time of day.
それに別に行方不明になったと決まったわけでもないし。
綿流しの直後ですから、少し慎重に扱った方がいいとのことです。それでも見つからないなら、明朝警察に通報しましょう。見つかる見つからないは別にして、痛くない腹を探られない方がいいでしょうから。
お嬢さんがそう言ったのかい？
はい。直接声を聞かないと信用できないなら、電話先に出させますよ。
いえ、わかりました。青年団を集めて探しましょう。それで見つからなければ、翌朝に警察に通報します。
青年団の連絡もよろしくお願いしますね。私もバッチャの代行ということでそちらに参ります。
ありがとう。すぐにみんなを集めます。
This dude so doesn't want to do this. He's like, we're gonna try to look for Kimiyoshi in this region of Japan at this time of day, at this time of year, in this darkness.
ええ。では。
The youth group had been gathered at the Furude shrine. They were going to try to find the mayor. I also had to go in the absence of the hag. Just to be mean, I stopped by the underground torture room to let the mayor know that I was headed to the Furude shrine to search for him. Incidentally, according to the tab on the keychain, this underground torture room was actually called the Underground Storehouse for Ritual Implements. This was the man who was yelling that whoever trespasses on the ritual storehouses should be killed. Although it was an underground ritual storehouse, he was there now, atoning for what he had done. It was pretty ironic. Maybe I was the only one who felt that way, though.
君吉のおじいちゃん、お具合はいかがですか？
Kimiyoshi didn't say a word, but he made a noise with the chain.
今ね、村中でおじいちゃんの姿が見えなくなったって大騒ぎしてますよ。おじいちゃんの家から相談が来たので、青年団を招集して捜索を行うことにしました。これから行ってくるところです。
Was this mean or what? Kimiyoshi could only make noise with the chain. He couldn't express any emotion other than anguish.
鎖、少し長くしてあげましょうか？私の質問にちゃんと答えてくれるたびに、そうですね。あと3個も長くなれば、だいぶ楽になると思うんですけどね。
Kimiyoshi's hands were tied behind his back with a tight wire. He was wearing a leather collar and with a chain, which was strapped tightly around his neck too. The collar's chain was on a pulley attached to the ceiling, with the chain pulling him up toward it. The chain was very short and pulled very tight. Kimiyoshi had to stand on tiptoes to be able to breathe. He had been like that for almost an hour already. He was already exhausted. If I left him overnight, he'd probably end up hanging himself.
さっきは知らないと言われましたけど、もう一回尋ねます。北条聡君について知っていることを教えてください。ああ、ごめんなさい。喋りたくても喋れません？じゃあ、私とおしゃべりの間だけちょっと緩めましょう。
I turned the pulley just a little to loosen the chain that was pulling on Kimiyoshi's neck. Kimiyoshi's heels finally touched the ground, relieving the pressure on his muscles.
知らないんだよ、シオンちゃん。本当に知らないんだ。
サトシ君が生きてるのか死んでるのか、それすらも。
おじいちゃんは本当に何も知らないんだよ。
ま、ひなみ沢のたたりのシステムはそういう部分で機密性を保持していますからね。おじいちゃんが知らないというのもありえなくはないことです。なら聞き方を変えます。サトシ君がどうなってるのか、君吉家当主の立場でご意見を伺いたいです。サトシ君は生きてる？死んでる？
Miyoshi didn't know what to say. If he said he didn't know, I'd tighten the chain and leave the room. That would be like a death sentence for him. But all I said was that I wanted him to speak as the head of the Kimiyoshi family. I didn't ask him to tell the truth, but he didn't know what to say to avoid souring my mood and to get me to loosen the chains around him. He was obviously trying to figure out how to make me extend the chain.
生きてるんじゃないかって噂を聞いたことがある。
ああ、新幹線で東京にってやつですね。
警察が東京で姿を見たというようなのを聞いた覚えが。
Oishi had told me that Satoshi had been witnessed getting on a bullet train heading to Tokyo at Nagoya Station. But the police didn't know if that really happened, or what became of Satoshi after that. Therefore, this was simply a random assertion of Kimiyoshi's.
ねえ、君吉家の当主様？呪われた一族、北条家の人間をわざわざ失踪なんていう凝った消し方をしていて、わざわざ生かしておくのにどんな理由があるんです？ないんじゃないですか？それに、その東京で警察が見たという情報ソースを教えてください。
I heard Keisatsu.
私は大石と一時期連絡を密にしていましたが、そんなのは聞いたことないです。おじいちゃん、私の機嫌を取ろうとしていい加減なことを言ったなら、 かえって怒っちゃいますよ。
I reached for the pulley controlling the chains around Kimiyoshi, and that act alone sent him panicking as he feared them tightening once more.
ごめんよ。別にシオンちゃんを怒らせようなんてつもりはないんだよ。謝るよ。
私、ご機嫌取りの話なら聞きたくないんで。君吉のおじいちゃんに、サトシ君のことを調べる協力をお願いしてるだけなんです。
わかってる。ちゃんと真面目に考えるから。
I took my hand off of the pulley. Seeing that, Kimiyoshi began making loud groaning noises to try and show he was thinking hard.
ズバリ、生きていると思いますか？死んでいると思いますか？
生きてると考えるのは難しいんじゃないかと思う。
Do you think he's alive or dead? I think that you shouldn't think that I think that you think that I think that I might be thinking that you shouldn't think he's alive.
ですよね。生かしておくことで伴う膨大なリスクを負う意味ないですもんね。私だって同感ですし。
I really didn't mean anything too deep by it, but what I said truly scared Kimiyoshi.
警察は、おば殺しの犯人がサトシ君で、サトコの誕生日プレゼントを買うために貯めてた貯金で逃亡したと、そう考えてました。この辺、どう思います？
でも、その犯人は確か麻薬中毒の危ないやつだと聞いたよ。
あれ、どう思います？私は私がこう言うのも変だけど、サトシ君がおば殺しの犯人だって信じてるんですよ。あいつは例えばばあさんあたりに買収されて仕立て上げられた身代わりじゃないかと思うんですけど。
それはおじいちゃんも思ってたよ。突然ひょっこりと真犯人でしたなんて言われて腑に落ちなかった。
やっぱり身代わり？
多分そうじゃないかと思うよ。
何のためにだと思います？
警察はサトシ君が犯人だと思って捜査を進めてたんだよね。サトシ君を鬼隠しということで失踪させておきたいと思うなら、警察の捜査がいつまでも続くのは面白くなかったんじゃないかな。
What Kimiyoshi just said is very interesting. He's perfectly correct. If the police continued their investigation, it would complicate things for whoever demoned away Satoshi. Therefore, the hack came up with a decoy in order to bring an end to the investigation.
でも、そんな犯人のでっち上げなんて、そうそう簡単にできることじゃないですよ。
お嬢さん以外にはできないよ。そんなことは。
ばあさんが裏の世界で相当の力を持ってるというのは、私も知ってはいますけど、そんなにもあったんですね。
シオンちゃんだっていろいろとダウン戦争の頃から噂は聞いてるだろうし、中には実際に直接聞いたものもあるんじゃないかい？
During the dam protest, I actually saw them issuing orders to my relatives, like destroy their heavy machinery, or can we set up a checkpoint to blockade their construction vehicles? They set free their comrades from the police by coming up with alibis, destroying or forging evidence. I had seen relatives do those things, as well as the hag calling in counselors to house the Jesus fuck. As well as the hag calling in counselors to the house to protest. Jeez. As a child, I was pretty impressed. But when I thought back, it was more than that. She was truly the mastermind who controlled the underside of the world.
シオンちゃんだって建設省の幹部の息子というか建設大臣の孫だな。あれの誘拐事件の話は知ってるだろ
う。あれってやっぱ誘拐だったんですか？
So now we're learning more about Chapter 4.
孫が鬼隠しになって高津戸だか矢河内だかの山奥で見つかったって話は知ってたんですけどね。
What? Okay, I don't remember where that village was. but it's like 5 minutes away from Hinamizawa. Like you have to cross Hinamizawa and then go like past it a little bit. And then there's this old abandoned village.
あれはお嬢さんの指図によるものだよ。ダム工事の中止の約束が取り付けられたんで、孫を釈放したっていうのは、おじいちゃんたち旧同盟の幹部ならみんな知ってる。
身近にいすぎて私がよく分かってなかっただけで、やっぱりばあさんとか御三家とか旧同盟って大したもんだったんですね。怖い怖い。
Miyoshi finally realized the situation he was in, and he was answering my questions. That made me happy, but the more Kimiyoshi told me the truth, the more I realized Satoshi really was dead. That made me very sad.
サトシ君を鬼隠しにした実行犯は誰だと思います？
わからないよ。それに誰が実際にやったかは問わないのが不分律だったから。
He was right. That was how the system worked. And so, that was a bad question.
誰がやったにせよ、大したものですよね。だって、人を殺して死体も出てこないなんて、結構簡単なことじゃないんじゃないですか？
誰が殺したかは別にして。例えば、死体の処理をお嬢さんが手伝ったという可能性は考えられるよ。今いるここの奥に死体を捨てるための井戸があることは知ってるだろ？
ああ、確かに。どこかの山中に埋めるくらいなら、ここの井戸に捨てる方が絶対に安全ですもんね。
Whoever disappears becomes a sacrifice to calm the anger of Oyashiro-sama. That was the rule of this game. Therefore, the bodies must never be discovered. That's why the bodies had to be dumped somewhere nobody could find them. It is very possible that the well was used for that. Then, Satoshi is at the bottom of that well? I grabbed a flashlight and headed to the huge cave with all the cells. As I turned on the lights in the cave, Mio noticed me and gave me a worried look. I ignored her and headed to the cell in the back. I was still very impressed by how well it was hidden. It was almost artistic. I shone the flashlight at the bottom of the well. I had no way of knowing how deep the well was. The light of the flashlight wasn't strong enough to reach the bottom. I inhaled, then screamed into the well.
Satoshi-kun!
Satoshi's name echoed again and again. It was obviously a very, very deep well. I thought of climbing down using the wedges on the wall, but with the flashlight hanging from my neck, I couldn't light my footing properly. And even if there was enough lighting, I didn't even know if the wedges were sturdy enough. It would be like committing suicide. Satoshi-kun was at the bottom of this well. That's when I felt it. A warm hand rubbed my head for sure. Shion, you finally found me. Satoshi. I've been looking for you for so long. I'm sorry I couldn't find you while you were still alive. I'm sorry. It's not your fault, Shion. There was nothing you could have done before I was killed. But you did everything you could to do after I was dead. Satoshi, I want to join you. I'm coming right now. I'm going to jump, so please catch me. Satoshi smiled bitterly. I was saddened to see him reject me. Shion, I'm happy that you found me. But you are alive, Shion. It's so important to be alive, you can't waste it. If you aren't here, I don't want to live. I want to be with you, Satoshi. I want to be close to you. I want you to rub my head again. I want to spend time with you. I'll be a good girl. I want to be with you. Live. Do I have to? Live and enjoy your life, okay? What's so fun about living alone? You'll find out, so long as you're alive.
生きるよ。生きる。
The eerie well now felt warm. I wasn't allowed to go down to the bottom, but the edge of this well was the place where you and I could meet.
ミオン、サトシ君、見つけた。井戸の底なんだね。そうだと思う。そこしかないもん。
ミオン started to sob.
ミオンはサトシ君が殺されるところには居合わせなかったんだよね。うん。もし居合わせたらサトシ君を許してもらえるようばあさんに意見してくれたかな。絶対にする。せめて命だけはって。嘘だ。え？嘘だー！
On that day a year ago, I had just recalled how cruel Mion was then, when she forced me to rip out my nails, acting in her role as a successor. Even if she was there when Satoshi was killed, she wouldn't have stopped being the successor. Satoshi was brought to the torture room, where he saw Mion. I'm sure he thought she would save him. Even as he heard the family head read out his death sentence, I'm sure he looked at Mion and believed that she would save him. He believed Mion was acting that way only because she was with her relatives. He believed she would help him, but she didn't do anything. He was strapped to a restraining device, yet she still wouldn't do anything. Mion was cruel. Mion? Isn't it about time to help me? I see. I get it. You're with the rest of the family members, so you can't even show a hint of compassion. That sucks.
なんで助けないの？サトシ君の助けを懇願する眼差しを見て、どうして心を動かされなかったの？あんたはサトシ君が意地悪おばのせいで追い詰められていた時から何も救いを差し伸べなかった。あんたは同情する素振りを見せるだけで助けなかった。見殺した。あんたがサトシ君を助けなかったから追い詰められたんだ。私は救おうと頑張ったよ。彼の心の支えになろうと頑張った。あんたらがサトシ君のおば殺しをかばわなくても、私は彼のアリバイのために自らを投げ打って戦った。その結果が爪3枚なんて安いもんでしょ。でもね、それだけの努力じゃサトシ君を救うには全然届かなかった。どうしてか。だって私はシオンだったんだもん。シオンはひなみ沢から遠ざけられていて、何からも戸ざまで何も教えられなくて知れなくて。でもあんたは違う。あんたはミオンだった。あんたはひなみ沢のうちにいて、全ての中心で全てを教えられて全てを知ることができた。私があんただったらきっとサトシ君を救えた。私なら救ってあげられた。あんたがミオンになったからだ。返してミオン。もともとミオンはあんただけのもんじゃない。私のものでもあったはず。それにもともとミオンは私のじゃない。
I was about to say this. I was just thinking this. So sorry to interrupt this. But when she mentioned one day we swapped places and Shion went to the amusement park, she was never heard from again. Meaning that Shion was Mion the whole time.
私があんたに貸してあげるようになっただけで、本当は私のだったじゃない。返せ！私のミオンを返せ！お前がミオンの外見をしているだけでも無実が走る。お前じゃなく私がミオンだったら、だったら
I kicked the bars. I kicked them again and again. Mion curled up fearfully in the back of the cell, as if she were trying to prevent the bars from crashing down onto her. So that was like the big hint that they gave you. Then here it is, like the big reveal. Hey, by the way, Shion was Mion the whole time. That was quite the chapter. Let's quickly look at the new tip, and then we'll get ready to wrap things up for tonight. So notebook page 188. After that, I joined the youth group in search of Kimiyoshi. I went down to the town council's phone directory and called to see if he had visited, then had the group split according to the circular notice divisions and sent them to search the town. Everybody seemed to be assuming they wouldn't find him, but since I knew they definitely never would, it was just bothersome to me. Even after midnight, they were all still enthusiastically looking for him. I bore the sleepiness while yawning. Then I heard somebody whisper, "Last year, we did the same thing when Satoshi Hojo went missing. The youth group was looking for someone who would never be found, just like last year." I was yawning because I knew this. Last year, there must have also been some people who were yawning and grinning on the inside.
去年の捜索って何時に終わりましたっけ?
Okay, there's no art for these guys.
あ？北条んとこのサトシん時かい？ありゃ何時だったっけ？
午前の0時過ぎくらいには解散したような気がするな。
It was already 2 in the morning. Although they spent this much time searching for Kimiyoshi, they didn't do the same when Satoshi went missing. After all, some people knew they wouldn't find him. They must have been sleepy. They must have said they should leave it to the police. Shit. I want to kill the people who said that. Oh man. Well, again, this chapter was quite something. So, some internal theories that I had were kind of proven correct. Because I did have an inkling that maybe Shion was Mion after all. The main reason for that is because during the phone call with Keiichi at the end of chapter 2, Keiichi thought he was talking to Mion the whole time. To Shion the whole time. But it was actually Mion. That was the big reveal. That was Shion confessing to actually being Mion. It was Shion telling Keiichi, the Shion that you knew was always Mion. This can also be seen just like in their mannerisms. For example, I don't remember off the top of my head, because again, it was last year. It was like 6 months ago. Or 5 months ago. They mentioned something along the lines of, the first twin to be born is the one that bears the ogre kanji in their name. Right? The oni kanji in their name. Usually, they are like I believe they mentioned something along the lines of them needing to be the embodiment of the ogre, you know, the blood that flows through them. And because of that, they tend to be colder or more aggressive, some shit like that. They have to be like the ogre in their name. So, we would see Mion. By that I mean, not Shion in this one. Now it's going to be more confusing. The Mion in the cage would act cold, and anytime we would see Shion, the Mion not in the cage, she would always be kind and sweet. Anytime she would be upset in the way, you know, a girl would get upset. Anytime the Mion in the cage would get upset, it would be very violent. It would be in a very violent manner. She would be cold and uncaring. That was like a big hint this whole time. That, because when the Mion outside of the cage, Shion, would get really fucking mad, she would have this other persona from within, like, boil up and act for her. And that's what happened when she shocked, or when she stunned Mayor Kimiyoshi. So these have all been like very subtle storytelling hints. So this was just like a big double, like, you know, double twist. Like the original twist in chapter 2 of like, oh, by the way, I'm Mion. Ha 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 ha. Shion has been missing this whole time. Which was not a lie. But then they twisted again here by revealing that Shion was always Mion and that Mion was always Shion. So we knew that she knew that she knew that we knew that we knew that she knew that we would think we would know, that she would think that we would know, that we would think she would know, we would think she would know, and she would know that we would think that she would think this, resulting in this huge confusion. And it's just one big game of I know that you know that you know that I know that I know that you know that you know that I know that I know that you know. This is really, 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 really good writing. This is incredible writing. And you have to remember that Ryukishi is writing or wrote the scenario, I believe, for Final Fantasy, for Silent Hill F, which is coming up soon. So hey, I can't wait to stream that. So hopefully we get to play that later on this year. But in the meantime, I think now is a good stopping point. So let's go ahead and swap on over to the ending screen.